大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者 J。 有一种人，他的一生像一条河，静静流淌，却从不停歇。他在政治风暴中被卷走，又在哲学的大海中找回自己。他用几十年的时光，为中国最神秘的2本书重新开了一扇窗。这个人叫陈鼓应，他是台湾最重要的道家学者之一。他的名字就像他研究的老子一样，低调却有千钧之重。今天就让 Jenny 带你走进这位大师的世界，一起感受老庄哲学的无限深意，也感受一个读书人在乱世中的坚持与转化。陈鼓应1935年生于福建长汀，那是一个兵荒马乱的年代，战争的硝烟还没散去，他的童年就在颠沛流离中度过。1949年，他随家人渡海来台，从此在这座岛屿上扎根，开始了他漫长的学术旅程。年轻的陈鼓应进入台湾大学哲学系就读，那个年代的台大哲学系是一片严肃而深邃的学术土地。他在这里遇见了一生最重要的老师方东美。方东美是20世纪最重要的中国哲学家之一，他以一种诗意的方式诠释中国传统思想，让陈鼓应第一次感受到哲学不只是冷冰冰的逻辑，也可以是生命的温度。陈鼓应在台大一路读到硕士，后来又在台大任教，开始系统性的研究道家哲学。他早年对尼采也有浓厚兴趣，曾出版过尼采哲学的相关著作。这种中西哲学的双重训练，让他后来在诠释老庄时，有了更宽广的视野，能在东西方思想之间穿梭对话。然而，学术的道路从来不只是书斋里的安静。1970年代初期，台湾政治进入了一段特别敏感的时期。陈鼓应开始在校园内公开谈论民主与自由，这在当时的白色恐怖氛围下，是一件需要极大勇气的事情。1973年，他和台大同事一起发动了著名的台大哲学系事件，那是台湾学术史上的一个震动。一群哲学教授因为倡议学术自由，遭到校方和当局的打压，陈鼓应因此被台大解聘。一个正值学术盛年的学者，就这样被赶出了校园。被解聘之后的陈鼓应并没有沉默，他继续写作，继续发声。他曾以诗意的语言说，当一个人无法在体制内发声，他就回到老子说的那条路，退而不缩，柔而不弱。这段政治风暴的岁月，反而让他更深地走入老庄的世界。他在老子的思想里，找到了一种面对强权的方式，不是对抗，不是逃避，而是以柔克刚，以静带动。1979年，陈鼓应离开台湾，赴美进修，后来转往中国大陆，在北京大学哲学系任教。这一转，开启了他人生的另一个篇章。在北京大学的岁月，他与大陆学界展开了深度对话。道家哲学在那个年代的大陆学界，正逐渐从意识形态的阴影中走出来。陈鼓应带来了他在台湾和西方培育出的视野，为这片古老的学术土地注入了新的活力。然而，我们必须把镜头拉回他最重要的学术成就，那就是他对老子与庄子的现代诠释。老子这本书只有5000多字，薄薄的一册，却让几千年来无数人好手穷经。因为他的每一句话都像一颗种子，种下去之后会长出完全不同的树。陈鼓应在1970年出版了他的代表作《老子注释及评介》。这本书的出现，在中文学术界引发了巨大的回响。为什么？因为在他之前，很多人诠释老子都用一种神秘主义的方式，把老子讲得玄之又玄，仿佛老子是一个坐在云端的仙人，在说一些凡人听不懂的话。陈鼓应不同，他用现代人能读懂的语言，把老子拉回到人间。他强调，老子的道不是一个神学概念，而是一个关于自然与生命的哲学命题。他在书中说，道是万物的本源，道是宇宙运行的规律，道是人应该效法的生命态度。他用清晰的现代汉语，加上严谨的文献考证，让老子对普通读者开口说话。 这本书后来被译成多种语言，成为全球汉学界研究老子的重要参考文献，也成为无数中文读者进入道家世界的第一扇门。如果老子是一首凝练的诗，那庄子就是一部奔放的小说。庄子的文字汪洋恣意，寓言繁多，逻辑跳跃，既是哲学，也是文学，也是梦境。陈鼓应在完成老子的研究之后，把更大的精力投入到庄子的诠释上。他的庄子今注今译是目前中文世界最权威的庄子注释本之一。这部著作的特点是把艰深的古文转化成现代读者可以理解的语言，同时保留了庄子那种天马行空的文学气质。陈鼓应在书中说，庄子不是一个消极的虚无主义者，庄子是一个对生命充满热爱的人。他用蝴蝶梦的故事告诉我们，生命的边界是流动的，你以为的真实未必是最终的真实。这种诠释在当时是有突破性的，因为很长一段时间，庄子被某些学者解读为一种逃世哲学，一种鸵鸟心态。陈鼓应却说，庄子的逍遥游不是逃跑，而是一种精神的自由飞翔，是在认清现实的限制之后，仍然保有内心广大天地的能力。这个观点让很多读者在庄子身上找到了一种全新的共鸣，特别是在面对人生困境时，庄子那种不被环境束缚的精神成为很多人心灵的出口。我们稍微停下来聊一聊陈鼓应的学术方法论，因为这是他影响深远的重要原因之一。陈鼓应有一个很鲜明的学术立场，他认为中国哲学不能只被当作古董来研究，它必须和现代人的生命发生连结，才有真正的意义。他提出了一个重要的观点，叫做道家主干说。他认为在先秦哲学的格局里，道家才是主干，儒家是在道家的基础上发展出来的。这个观点在学界引发了很大的争论。传统的说法是儒家主导了中国哲学的主流，道家是边缘的补充性的存在。陈鼓应却说不对，他从大量的古代文献中找到证据，说明老子的思想比孔子更早，而且儒家许多核心概念都可以追溯到道家的源头。这个观点当然引起了很多学者的反驳，但争论本身就是学术活力的展现。陈鼓应用他的研究打开了一个全新的讨论空间，让先秦哲学的版图有了更立体的面貌。陈鼓应还有另一个重要的学术贡献，就是他对道家和批判精神的连结。在很多人的印象里，道家是消极的，是与世无争的，是叫人不要管事的。陈鼓应却说，道家骨子里有一种深刻的批判精神。老子对当时的政治秩序提出了质疑，庄子对礼教束缚进行了嘲讽。哈他内批判不是愤世嫉俗，而是来自对生命本质的深刻洞察。这个诠释角度让道家哲学在现代社会找到了新的位置。它不只是古人的智慧，它也是现代人面对各种体制压迫时可以援引的精神资源。让我们把镜头拉近一点，看看陈鼓应这个人本身。认识他的人说，他是一个外表温文儒雅，内心却有火的人。他说话轻声细语，但在谈到学术观点时绝不含糊。他有老子的柔，也有庄子的狂，两者在他身上奇妙地结合在一起。他晚年有一段时间在两岸之间穿梭，在台湾大学和北京大学都有授课。这种特殊的身份让他成为两岸学术交流的桥梁，也让他的道家诠释在更广阔的文化语境中被讨论和传播。有一个细节很有意思，陈鼓应年轻时曾深受尼采影响。尼采说，上帝死了，人必须自己创造价值，这是一种对传统的激烈反叛。而道家的老子说，为学日益，为道日损，损之又损，以至于无味，这是一种向内收摄的智慧。表面上尼采和老子是完全不同的方向，但陈鼓应说他们有一个共同的核心，就是对虚假秩序的怀疑和对生命真实状态的追求。这种对话能力 是陈鼓应学术生命力的重要来源。他不把老庄关在一个密封的玻璃柜里供人瞻仰，他让老庄走出来，和海德格尔对话，和维根斯坦对话，和尼采对话，让这些2000年前的声音在现代哲学的广场上继续回荡。说到影响，陈鼓应的著作影响了几代读者，他的老子注释及评介以及庄子今注今译是无数人进入道家世界的引路之书。在台湾，在大陆，在海外华人社群，只要有人认真读道家，几乎都绕不过陈鼓应这个名字。他的学生遍布两岸，很多今天活跃的哲学学者都曾受过他直接或间接的影响。他在课堂上的风格，据说是把深奥的哲学问题用最简单的语言说清楚，然后让学生自己去思考，去感受。这种教学方式和他诠释老庄的精神是一致的。道家说，圣人不积，己以为人己欲有。这句话的意思是，真正的智者不囤积，把智慧给出去之后，自己反而拥有的更多。陈鼓应的一生，某种程度上就是这句话的实践。他把几十年的研究心得倾囊相授，让道家的智慧流向更广的人群，而他自己也在这个过程中不断深化对道的理解。我们再回头看看他年轻时的那段政治风暴，被解聘，被边缘化，在另一个人身上，这或许是一场毁灭性的打击，但在陈鼓应身上，它成了一个淬炼。老子说，曲则全，枉则直，洼则盈，敝则新。意思是，弯曲反而能保全，受屈反而能伸直，低洼反而能充满。陈鼓应的人生轨迹就是这几句话最好的注脚。他在最困难的时候，没有选择愤怒或绝望，而是选择了深潜，回到文字，回到老庄，从古老的智慧中汲取力量，然后以更强大的姿态重新出发。这让我想到庄子里的一个寓言，大鹏鸟要飞往南冥，需要积蓄9万里的风力，才能扶摇直上。惠姑说，我一个春天就够了，何必那么费事？陈鼓应就像那只大鹏，他用了几十年积蓄学术的风力，然后飞得很高很远，远到能看见老庄思想在整个人类文明中的位置。晚年的陈鼓应继续笔耕不辍，他不断修订和完善自己的著作，因为他说，对老庄的理解是一辈子的事情，每读一次都有新的体会，这本身就是道家精神的最好体现。道可道，非常道。真正的道是流动的，是不断更新的。陈鼓应的故事让我们看到了什么？首先，我们看到了一个读书人的骨气，在政治压力面前，他选择了说真话，即使付出了代价。其次，我们看到了一个学者的转化力，把个人的苦难转化为对智慧更深的探索。第三，我们看到了一个诠释者的使命感，让古老的智慧说现代的语言，让2000年前的老子和庄子在今天仍然有话可说。道德经的第1章说，道可道，非常道。能够被说出来的道，就不是永恒的道。但陈鼓应却用他一生的努力告诉我们，即使道无法被完全说清楚，我们仍然值得用一辈子去靠近它，去感受它，去让它渗入我们的生命。这大概就是陈鼓应留给我们最深的启示，不是一个答案，而是一种姿态，一种谦逊而开放地面向智慧的姿态。谢谢你今天和 Jenny 一起走进陈鼓应的世界，走进老庄的世界。如果这集内容让你对道家哲学有了一点点新的感受，那就是沉思者 J 存在的意义。让我们更深入地进入陈鼓应的学术殿堂，来看看他如何具体地诠释老子的核心概念。老子哲学有一个最核心的字，就是道。这个字看似简单，却是整个宇宙最深的谜。老子在《道德经》的开篇就说，道可道，非常道，名可名，非常名。这几句话翻成白话，就是说，能被言说的道，就不是那个永恒的道；能被命名的名， 就不是那个永恒的名。陈鼓应说，老子这样开篇，是一种哲学上的深刻诚实。他承认语言的局限，他告诉你，我要说的这个东西，我的语言无法完全说清楚，但我还是要说，因为说是朝向道的一种努力。这种姿态让陈鼓应非常感动。他说，哲学最大的危险，就是以为自己说清楚了。老子不一样，老子知道自己没有说清楚，但仍然努力去说，这是一种知之为知之的精神。陈鼓应在诠释老子的无畏概念时，提出了一个重要的澄清。很多人误解无畏，以为是什么都不做，懒惰的合理化借口。陈鼓应说，不对，无畏的意思是，不做违背自然规律的事情，不强行干预，不以人为意志扭曲事物的本性。他举了一个生动的例子，一棵树要长高，你不能每天去把它往上拔，那样只会伤害它。你只需要给它适合的土壤、阳光和水，让它按照自己的本性生长。这就是无畏。这个诠释让无畏从一个消极的概念变成了一个充满智慧的行动原则。它告诉我们，最好的管理是让万物发挥自身的潜能，而不是用外力强加。这个道理在教育上有用，在政治上有用，在人际关系上也有用。陈鼓应对老子另一个核心概念的诠释同样精彩，那就是水的哲学。老子说，天下莫柔弱于水，而攻坚强者莫之能胜。意思是，天下没有什么比水更柔弱的，但攻打坚强的东西，没有什么能胜过水。陈鼓应说，老子用水这个意象，是要告诉我们一个反直觉的道理。在这个世界上，强硬并不代表力量，柔软才往往代表真正的力量。他说，你看一块巨石放在水中，短时间内它巍然不动，你以为水奈何不了它，但再过1000年，石头被水磨成了沙，水却还在流。这就是老子说的柔弱胜刚强。陈鼓应说，这个道理放在人生上，就是不要以刚克刚，要善用柔性的力量。在职场上，在家庭里，在面对困难时，过度的强硬往往适得其反，而适度的弹性与退让反而能达到目的。这种智慧在他自己被解聘的那段时间里得到了最真实的验证。他没有硬碰硬，他选择了虔诚，选择了蓄积，然后以更强大的学术成就证明了自己的价值。说完老子，我们再来深入庄子的世界。庄子有一个最著名的故事，叫做庖丁解牛。一个叫庖丁的厨师，宰牛的技术达到了神乎其技的境界，他的刀用了19年，还像新的一样锋利，因为他从来不割骨头，他的刀只在骨头与骨头之间的缝隙里游走。梁惠王问他，你的技术怎么这么好？庖丁说，我靠的不是技术，而是道。我用心去感受牛的整个结构，让刀跟着牛的自然结构走，不强行，不硬切，游刃有余。陈鼓应说，这个故事是庄子对人生艺术的最好诠释。所谓游刃有余，就是找到事物的自然节奏，然后顺着它走，不对抗，不强求。他说，这个故事也可以放在学术研究上。最好的研究不是强行把自己的想法套在文本上，而是让自己的思维跟着文本走，感受它的机理，找到它的缝隙，让思想在那里自然流动。这种研究态度是陈鼓应几十年学术生涯的核心。他不是把老庄变成他想要的样子，他是让自己去适应老庄，去感受老庄原来的面貌，然后用现代的语言把那个面貌如实传递出来。庄子还有另一个著名故事，叫做相濡以沫。2条鱼被困在干涸的水洼里，互相用唾沫湿润对方，勉强维持生命。庄子说，这不如2条鱼都在江湖里，各自畅游，相忘于江湖。很多人觉得这个故事很悲伤，或者觉得庄子在否定情感。陈鼓应却说，不是的，庄子要说的是，真正的自由与幸福 是让每个生命都回到它本该存在的状态。困境中的相濡以沫固然感人，但那不是最好的状态。最好的状态是个有广阔的天地，自由地展开自己。他说，这个故事放在教育上，就是说，最好的教育不是让学生依赖老师，而是让学生有能力相忘于江湖，各自去开创自己的学术天地。这种诠释让庄子的很多看似消极的预言都有了积极而深刻的现代意涵。陈鼓应的学术生命还有一个很值得注意的面向，那就是他对中西哲学的融通。20世纪的中国哲学面临一个巨大的挑战，就是如何回应西方哲学的冲击。西方哲学有几千年的逻辑传统，有严格的分析方法，有清晰的概念界定。在很多人眼中，中国哲学显得缺乏这样的严格性。陈鼓应正面迎接这个挑战，他不是要把老庄西化，也不是要拒绝西方的方法，而是在两者之间找到一个对话的平台。他说，老子说到无法被完全说清楚，这和西方哲学家维根斯坦说的凡是能说的都能说清楚，凡是不能说的就应该沉默有一种奇妙的呼应。两个来自完全不同文化的哲学家都在语言的边界上停下来凝视，都感受到语言的局限。这不是巧合，这说明有些人类共同的哲学困境超越了文化的差异。他还说，海德格尔讲存在，讲人在世界中的存在，和老庄讲的道有很多可以对话的地方。道不只是宇宙的法则，也是人存在的根基。这和海德格尔的存在论有着深刻的共鸣。这种跨文化的哲学对话让陈鼓应的老庄研究在国际汉学界也受到重视。它说明中国哲学不是一个封闭的体系，它可以和世界上最重要的哲学思想展开真正的对话。我们也不能不提陈鼓应在学术生涯中对后辈学者的影响和传承。他有一种特别的教学风格，他喜欢在课堂上制造一种探索的气氛。他不把答案直接给学生，他带着学生一起去摸索，去质疑，去推翻，然后再重建。他曾说，学哲学最怕的就是死记硬背，哲学是活的，它必须在你自己的生命中找到回响。如果老子对你的人生没有任何启发，你把它背得滚瓜烂熟又如何？这种教学态度影响了一代又一代的学生，让他们不只是学会了老庄的内容，更学会了一种面对哲学问题的姿态。陈鼓应在两岸之间长期往返，这段特殊的学术经历让他看到了道家哲学在不同政治环境中的命运。在台湾，道家曾长期被视为辅助性的思想；在大陆，道家经历了各种政治解读的起伏，但陈鼓应始终坚持道家的核心精神，超越政治，超越意识形态。它是人类面对宇宙和自身时最深沉的哲学追问。这种坚持让他的学术研究保持了一种超然而又入世的品格。他从不回避现实，但也从不让现实扭曲他对老庄的诠释。陈鼓应的故事即将走向尾声，但道家的智慧永远没有尾声。老子说，为学日益，未到日损，损之又损，以至于无畏，无畏而无不畏。意思是说，追求学问要每天累积，但追求道却要每天减少，减少那些不必要的执念，减少那些多余的作为，最后看似什么都不做，却什么都能成就。陈鼓应的一生某种程度上走了这样的路。他年轻时的锋芒毕露，政治风暴中的被迫退让，沉潜之后的深度积累，最终化为了一种从容，一种对老庄发自内心的亲近。他不是研究老庄的人，他是活在老庄里的人。这是最高的学术境界，也是最真实的生命状态。我们下次见咯。Hello everyone, I am Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. There is a certain kind of person. Their life flows like a river, quiet and steady, yet never stopping. They get swept up in political storms, and find themselves again in the vast ocean of philosophy. They spend decades reopening a window, to the two most mysterious books in Chinese history. This person is Chen Guying. He is one of the most important Taoist scholars Taiwan has ever produced. His name, much like the Laozi he devoted his life to studying, carries a quiet weight that belies its understated presence. Today, join me as we step into the world of this remarkable thinker. We will feel the boundless depth of Taoist philosophy together, and witness the perseverance and transformation of a scholar navigating turbulent times. Chen Guying was born in 1935 in Chongqing, Fujian Province. It was an era of chaos and conflict. The smoke of war had not yet cleared. His childhood unfolded amid upheaval and displacement. In 1949, he crossed the Taiwan Strait with his family, and took root on that island, beginning what would become a lifelong journey of scholarship. The young Chen Guying entered the philosophy department at National Taiwan University. In those years, the NTU Philosophy faculty was a place of serious and profound academic inquiry. It was there that he met the teacher who would shape his entire intellectual life, Fang Dongmei. Fang Dongmei was one of the most significant Chinese philosophers of the 20th century. He interpreted traditional Chinese thought through a poetic lens. And for the first time, Chen Guying felt that philosophy need not be cold logic alone. It could carry the warmth of lived experience. Chen Guying completed his graduate studies at NTU, and later joined its faculty, beginning a systematic exploration of Taoist philosophy. In his early years he was also deeply fascinated by Friedrich Nietzsche, and published works on Nietzschean philosophy. This dual training in Eastern and Western thought would later give him an unusually wide perspective when interpreting Laozi and Zhuangzi, allowing him to move fluidly between the two great intellectual traditions. Yet the path of scholarship has never been confined to the quiet study. In the early 1970s, Taiwan entered a particularly sensitive political period. Chen Guying began speaking openly on campus about democracy and freedom. In the atmosphere of the White Terror era, this required extraordinary courage. In 1973, he and colleagues at NTU ignited what became known as the NTU Philosophy Department Incident. It was a seismic event in Taiwanese academic history. A group of philosophy professors who championed academic freedom faced suppression from university authorities and the government. Chen Guying was dismissed from NTU as a result. A scholar at the height of his academic prime was expelled from the institution he had called home. After his dismissal, Chen Guying did not fall silent. He continued writing. He continued speaking out. He once described his experience in language that echoed Laozi himself. When a person can no longer speak within the system, they return to the path Laozi described. To retreat without shrinking, to be soft without being weak. Those years of political storms actually drove him deeper into the world of Laozi and Zhuangzi. In the thinking of Laozi, he found a way of confronting power. Not through confrontation, not through escape, but through yielding to overcome. Through stillness to outlast movement. In 1979, Chen Guying left Taiwan. He went abroad to continue his studies, and later joined the faculty of the philosophy department at Peking University. This transition opened an entirely new chapter in his life. During his years at Peking University, he entered into deep dialogue with mainland Chinese scholars. Taoist philosophy in that era was gradually emerging from the shadow of ideological constraints. Chen Guying brought with him a perspective shaped in Taiwan and the West, infusing that ancient academic landscape with fresh energy. But we must bring our lens back to his most enduring scholarly achievement, his modern interpretation of Laozi and Zhuangzi. The Laozi contains only around 5,000 characters, a slender volume. Yet for thousands of years it has confounded some of the greatest minds. Because every sentence within it is like a seed. Once planted, it can grow into something entirely different, depending on the soil and the gardener. In 1970, Chen Guying published his landmark work, The Annotated and Critically Interpreted Laozi. Its appearance sent ripples through the Chinese academic world. Why? Because before him, many scholars who wrote about Laozi interpreted it through a mystical lens. They made Laozi sound profoundly obscure, as if the old sage were a celestial figure seated in the clouds, speaking words no ordinary person could understand. Chen Guying was different. He used language that modern readers could actually grasp, and brought Laozi back down to earth. He argued that the Tao in Laozi is not a theological concept, but a philosophical proposition about nature and life. In his work he wrote, "The Tao is the source of all things. The Tao is the pattern governing the movement of the cosmos. The Tao is the attitude toward life that human beings should aspire to emulate." Through clear modern Chinese, combined with rigorous textual scholarship. He made Laozi speak directly to ordinary readers. That work was later translated into multiple languages and became an important reference for sinologists around the world. It also became the first gateway through which countless Chinese readers entered the Taoist tradition. If Laozi is a poem of crystalline condensation, then Zhuangzi is a novel of unrestrained exuberance. The prose of Zhuangzi surges in all directions. It overflows with parables. Its logic leaps and dances. It is philosophy, but also literature. It is argument, but also dream. After completing his work on Laozi, Chen Guying poured even greater energy into interpreting Zhuangzi. His annotated and translated Zhuangzi stands as one of the most authoritative commentaries in the Chinese-speaking world today. The defining quality of that work is its transformation of difficult classical text into language that contemporary readers can genuinely understand, while preserving the soaring, free-ranging literary spirit that makes Zhuangzi so distinctive. Chen Guying wrote in that work that Zhuangzi is not a passive nihilist. Zhuangzi is a person who loves life with great passion. Through the story of the butterfly dream, Zhuangzi tells us that the boundaries of life are fluid. What you believe to be real may not be the final reality. This interpretation was genuinely groundbreaking for its time. For a long period, some scholars had read Zhuangzi as an escapist philosophy, a kind of head-in-the-sand mentality. Chen Guying argued instead that the free and easy wandering of Zhuangzi is not a form of running away. It is a flight of spiritual freedom. It is the capacity to maintain a vast inner world, even after fully recognizing the constraints of external reality. This perspective gave many readers a completely new experience of Zhuangzi, particularly when facing the difficulties of life. The spirit of Zhuangzi of refusing to be bound by circumstances became a place of refuge for countless people. Let us pause for a moment and talk about the scholarly methodology of Chen Guying, because it is one of the key reasons his influence has been so enduring. Chen Guying held a very distinctive academic position. He believed that Chinese philosophy cannot be studied merely as an antique. It must connect with the lives of modern people. Only then does it carry genuine meaning. He advanced an important and provocative argument, which he called the Taoist backbone thesis. He proposed that within the landscape of preaching philosophy, Taoism forms the central backbone, and Confucianism developed on the foundation that Taoism laid. This argument sparked enormous debate in the scholarly community. The conventional view held that Confucianism dominated the mainstream of Chinese philosophy, and that Taoism was a marginal or supplementary presence. Chen Guying disagreed fundamentally. He assembled extensive evidence from ancient texts, demonstrating that the thought of Laozi predated Confucius, and that many core concepts in Confucianism can be traced back to Taoist origins. This position naturally attracted many counterarguments from fellow scholars, but the debate itself was a demonstration of intellectual vitality. Chen Guying opened a new space for discussion through his research, giving the map of preaching philosophy a more three-dimensional form. Chen Guying also made another important scholarly contribution in connecting Taoist thought to a spirit of critical inquiry. In the minds of many people, Taoism is passive. It is about not contending. It is about not getting involved. Chen Guying argued instead that at its core, Taoism carries a profound critical spirit. Laozi questioned the political order of his time. Zhuangzi mocked the constraints of ritual propriety. This criticism does not arise from cynicism or bitterness. It flows from a deep insight into the fundamental nature of life. This interpretive angle helped Taoist philosophy find a new place in modern society. It is not merely the wisdom of ancient people. It is a spiritual resource that contemporary people can draw upon when confronting the various forms of institutional pressure they encounter. Let us bring our lens a little closer and look at Chen Guying the person. Those who know him say, he is a man who appears gentle and refined on the surface, yet carries a fire within. He speaks quietly and softly, but when it comes to scholarly positions, he never equivocates. He has the yielding quality of Laozi and the untamed spirit of Zhuangzi. The two are woven together in him in a remarkable way. In his later years, Chen Guying spent time moving between both sides of the Taiwan Strait, teaching at both National Taiwan University and Peking University. This unusual position made him a bridge for academic exchange across the strait, and allowed his interpretation of Taoism to be discussed and disseminated in an even broader cultural context. One detail is particularly interesting. When Chen Guying was young, he was profoundly influenced by Nietzsche. Nietzsche declared that God is dead, and that human beings must create their own values. This is a fierce rebellion against tradition. Meanwhile, the Taoist Laozi says, in pursuit of learning, something is gained every day. In pursuit of the Tao, something is let go every day. Let go and let go again, until you arrive at non-action. This is a wisdom of inward gathering. On the surface, Nietzsche and Laozi seem to point in completely opposite directions. But Chen Guying argued that they share a common core, a suspicion of false order, and a pursuit of the genuine state of life. This capacity for dialogue across traditions is one of the most vital sources of the intellectual energy of Chen Guying. He never placed Laozi and Zhuangzi in a sealed glass case for people to admire from a distance. He let them walk out, into conversation with Heidegger, into conversation with Wittgenstein, into conversation with Nietzsche, letting voices from 2,000 years ago continue to resonate in the open square of modern philosophy. On the subject of influence, the works of Chen Guying have shaped generations of readers. His annotated Laozi and his translated Zhuangzi have served as guiding texts for countless people entering the Taoist world. In Taiwan, on the mainland, and in overseas Chinese communities, anyone who has seriously engaged with Taoism has almost certainly encountered the name Chen Guying. His students are spread across both sides of the strait. Many of the most active of today philosophy scholars have been shaped by his direct or indirect influence. His style in the classroom is reportedly one of taking the most profound philosophical questions and making them as simple as possible, then inviting students to think for themselves, to feel for themselves. This approach to teaching is entirely consistent with the spirit he brings to interpreting Laozi and Zhuangzi. The Tao Te Ching says, "The sage does not accumulate. The more they give to others, the more they themselves possess." The meaning is that the truly wise person does not hoard. After giving wisdom away, they find themselves in possession of even more. The life of Chen Guying is in some sense a living embodiment of those words. He gave away the insights of decades of research freely, directing the wisdom of Taoism toward a wider and wider circle of people. And in that very process, he himself deepened and renewed his understanding of the Tao. Let us look once more at that political storm from his younger years. Dismissed from his position, pushed to the margins. For another person, this might have been a devastating blow from which there is no recovery. But for Chen Guying, it became a forge. Laozi says, "Yield, and you will be preserved whole. Be bent, and you will be straightened. Be hollow, and you will be filled. Be worn out, and you will be renewed." The arc of the life of Chen Guying is the most eloquent annotation of those lines. In the most difficult moment, he did not choose anger or despair. He chose to dive deep, to return to the written word, to return to Laozi and Zhuangzi, to draw strength from ancient wisdom, and then to re-emerge in a more powerful form. This calls to mind a parable from Zhuangzi. The great ping bird, preparing to fly to the southern ocean, needs 90,000 li of wind beneath its wings before it can rise. The cicada says, "I need only spring to be enough. Why go to so much trouble?" Chen Guying is like that great ping bird. He spent decades accumulating the winds of scholarship, and then flew very high, and very far, far enough to see the place of Laozi and Zhuangzi within the full landscape of human civilization. In his later years, Chen Guying continued to write without pause. He kept revising and refining his works, because, he said, understanding Laozi and Zhuangzi is the work of a lifetime. Each reading brings new discovery, new sensation. This itself is the most authentic expression of the Taoist spirit. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The true Tao is always in motion, always renewing itself. What does the story of Chen Guying show us? First, we see the integrity of a scholar. In the face of political pressure, he chose to speak truth, even at great personal cost. Second, we see the transformative power of a thinker, the capacity to turn personal suffering into a deeper search for wisdom. Third, we see the missionary spirit of an interpreter, making ancient wisdom speak in a modern voice, so that Laozi and Zhuangzi from 2,000 years ago still have something to say today. The opening chapter of the Tao Te Ching says, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Whatever can be fully articulated is not the final truth." Yet Chen Guying spent his entire life showing us that even if the Tao cannot be perfectly expressed, it is still worth spending a lifetime drawing close to it, feeling it, letting it soak into the fabric of our lives. That is perhaps the deepest gift Chen Guying has left us. Not an answer, but a posture. A posture of humble and open-hearted movement toward wisdom. Thank you for joining Jenny today in walking through the world of Chen Guying and into the world of Laozi and Zhuangzi. If this episode has given you even a small new feeling for Taoist philosophy, then Thinker J has fulfilled its purpose. Let us go even deeper into the scholarly world of Chen Guying and examine how he specifically interpreted the core concepts of Laozi. Taoist philosophy has one central character at its heart. That word is Tao. The character appears deceptively simple, yet it holds the deepest mystery of the entire cosmos. In the very opening of the Tao Te Ching, Laozi writes, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." Translated into plain language, this means that whatever Tao can be fully articulated is not the Tao that is eternal and unchanging. Whatever name can be fixed upon something is not the name that endures forever. Chen Guying observed that by opening this way, Laozi was demonstrating a profound philosophical honesty. He acknowledged the limits of language. He was telling his reader, "The thing I am about to speak of cannot be fully captured by words. Yet I will still speak, because the act of speaking is itself a movement toward the Tao." This posture moved Chen Guying deeply. He said, "The greatest danger in philosophy is the illusion that one has already explained everything perfectly." Laozi was different. Laozi knew he had not explained it perfectly, and yet he pressed forward with the attempt. This is the spirit of genuine intellectual humility. When Chen Guying interpreted the concept of non-action in Laozi, he offered an important clarification. Many people misunderstand non-action, taking it to mean doing nothing at all, a philosophical cover for laziness. Chen Guying said this is incorrect. The true meaning of non-action is refraining from actions that violate the natural order of things, not interfering by force, not bending the nature of things to serve the human will. He offered a vivid illustration. If you want a tree to grow tall, you cannot go out every day and pull it upward. That would only damage it. What you do is provide the right soil, sunlight, and water, and let the tree grow according to its own nature. That is non-action. This interpretation transformed non-action from a passive and seemingly negative concept into a principle of action rich with wisdom. It tells us that the best form of governance is to allow all things to express their inherent potential, rather than imposing external force upon them. This principle applies in education. It applies in governance. It applies in human relationships of every kind. Another central concept interpreted by Chen Guying in Laozi is equally illuminating. That concept is the philosophy of water. Laozi writes, "Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet in attacking the firm and strong, nothing surpasses it." The meaning is that nothing appears more fragile than water, yet nothing is better than water at overcoming what is hard and strong. Chen Guying observed that Laozi used the image of water to convey a truth that runs counter to our instincts. In this world, hardness does not represent power. Softness is often where true strength resides. He elaborated, "Consider a great boulder placed in a river. For a short time it sits unmoved. You might think the water can do nothing against it. But come back in 1,000 years. The stone has been worn smooth and small. The water still flows." This is what Laozi means by the soft overcoming the hard. Chen Guying applied this to human life. Do not attempt to overcome hardness with more hardness. Learn to use the power of yielding. In the workplace, in family relationships, when confronting difficulty, excessive rigidity often produces the opposite of what was intended, whereas appropriate flexibility and willingness to step back often achieves the goal more effectively. This wisdom was verified in the most personal way during his own years of dismissal. He did not meet force with force. He chose to sink deep, to gather and accumulate, and then to demonstrate his value through ever more substantial scholarship. Having explored Laozi, let us now enter the world of Zhuangzi more deeply. Zhuangzi contains one of the most famous stories in all of Chinese philosophy, the story of Cook Ding. A cook named Ding had developed such extraordinary skill in butchering oxen that his knife, after 19 years of use, was still as sharp as the day it was new. Because he never cut against bone, his blade moved only through the spaces between joints and cavities. King Hui asked him, "How is your skill so remarkable?" Cook Ding replied, "What I work with is the Tao, not mere technique. I use my mind to perceive the entire structure of the ox, and let the blade follow the natural configuration. No forcing, no hacking, moving with effortless ease." Chen Guying explained that this story represents the finest expression of Zhuangzi of the art of living. The phrase effortless ease describes finding the natural rhythm of any situation, and moving along with it, without resistance, without compulsion. He noted that this principle applies to scholarly research as well. The best scholarship does not force your own ideas onto the text. It means letting your thinking follow the text, feeling its grain, finding its openings, letting thought flow naturally through those channels. This approach to research is the core of the decades of scholarship Chen Guying devoted himself to. He was not making Laozi and Zhuangzi into the shapes he preferred. He was adapting himself to Laozi and Zhuangzi, feeling their original form, and then transmitting that form faithfully in modern language. Zhuangzi contains another famous passage. The image of two fish stranded in a drying puddle, keeping each other alive by moistening each other with foam. Zhuangzi observes, how much better it would be if those two fish were both in a wide river, each swimming freely, having forgotten the other in the vastness of water. Many people read this story as something sad, or as Zhuangzi dismissing the value of caring for others. Chen Guying offered a different reading. What Zhuangzi is saying is that true freedom and genuine happiness come from allowing every living thing to exist in the state appropriate to its nature. The tenderness of two fish sustaining each other in a shrinking puddle is moving, but it is not the ideal state. The ideal state is each having a vast and open world to unfold freely within. He suggested that applied to education. This image teaches that the best education does not create students who depend on their teacher. It creates students capable of forgetting their teacher and going out to open their own horizons. This kind of interpretation gave many of the seemingly passive parables in Zhuangzi a positive and deeply relevant meaning for modern readers. There is another dimension of the academic work of Chen Guying that deserves attention. That is his capacity for dialogue between Chinese and Western philosophy. 20th century Chinese philosophy faced an enormous challenge: how to respond to the force of Western philosophical thought. Western philosophy had millennia of logical tradition behind it, rigorous methods of analysis, precise definition of concepts. In many eyes, Chinese philosophy appeared to lack this kind of systematic rigor. Chen Guying met this challenge directly. He was not trying to westernize Laozi and Zhuangzi, nor was he trying to reject Western methods. He was searching for a platform on which genuine dialogue could take place. He observed that Laozi says the Tao cannot be fully articulated, and Wittgenstein, the Western philosopher, says that what can be said clearly, and what cannot be said must be passed over in silence. There is a remarkable resonance between these two thinkers, two philosophers from entirely different cultures, both standing at the boundary of language and gazing outward, both sensing the limits of what words can do. This is not coincidence. It points to certain universal philosophical dilemmas in the human condition that transcend the differences between cultures. He also observed that Heidegger, writing about being, about the existence of human beings in the world, has much to say that resonates with the Tao. The Tao is not only a law of the cosmos, it is also the ground of human existence. This deep resonance with Heideggerian ontology helped Chen Guying show that Chinese philosophy can enter genuine dialogue with the world. This cross-cultural philosophical conversation gave Chen Guying an important standing in international sinological circles. It demonstrated that Chinese philosophy is not a closed and isolated system. It can engage in genuine dialogue with the most significant philosophical traditions on earth. We cannot leave Chen Guying without speaking of his influence on the generations that followed him. He had a very distinctive way of teaching. He liked to create an atmosphere of exploration in the classroom. He did not simply deliver answers to students. He guided them through the process of feeling their way forward, of questioning, of overturning, and then rebuilding. He once said, "The greatest danger in studying philosophy is rote memorization. Philosophy is alive. It must find an echo in your own life and experience. If Laozi gives you no insight into your own existence, what is the use of being able to recite it perfectly?" This attitude shaped generation after generation of students, teaching them not only the content of Laozi and Zhuangzi, but a posture for engaging with philosophical questions. Chen Guying spent long periods moving between both sides of the Taiwan Strait. This unusual academic experience allowed him to observe the fate of Taoist philosophy across different political environments. In Taiwan, Taoism had long been treated as supplementary to the Confucian mainstream. On the mainland, Taoism had passed through many cycles of political interpretation. Yet Chen Guying maintained consistently that the essential spirit of Taoism transcends politics, transcends ideology. It is the deepest philosophical questioning that human beings undertake when confronting the cosmos and themselves. This commitment gave his scholarship a quality that was simultaneously removed from the world and deeply engaged with it. He never turned away from reality, but he never allowed reality to bend his interpretation of Laozi and Zhuangzi. Let us now speak about something that often surprises people: the relationship between Chen Guying and the concept of courage. Many people think of Taoist scholars as quiet and withdrawn figures, people who sit peacefully and contemplate ancient texts, far from the noise and conflict of the world. Chen Guying showed us something different. He demonstrated that deep engagement with Taoist thought can actually make a person braver, not recklessly brave, but genuinely, quietly, sustainably brave. When he stood up for academic freedom at NTU in the 1970s, he was not acting out of naive idealism. He understood the risks clearly. He had read enough of Laozi to know that standing firm against pressure sometimes means losing in the short term, but that yielding your integrity means losing something that cannot be recovered. Laozi says, "I have 3 treasures that I hold and cherish. The first is compassion. The second is frugality. The third is not daring to put oneself before others." Chen Guying lived by all 3. His compassion was expressed through his scholarship, his genuine desire that ordinary readers could access the wisdom of Laozi and Zhuangzi without needing to wade through impenetrable classical commentary. His frugality was expressed in his intellectual method. He never overclaimed. He never pretended the text said more than it did. When he was uncertain, he said he was uncertain. And his refusal to put himself forward was expressed in his lifelong insistence that the text, not the commentator, should be at the center of the experience readers have. This last point deserves more attention. There is a kind of scholar who uses ancient texts as a stage for demonstrating their own brilliance. The ancient words become an occasion for the scholar to perform. Chen Guying was not that kind of scholar. He was consistently more interested in what Laozi and Zhuangzi actually said than in showing what Chen Guying thought about it. This self-effacing quality is itself a deeply Taoist quality. The Tao Te Ching says, "The sage does not display himself, therefore he shines, does not justify himself, therefore he is distinguished, does not boast, therefore he has merit, does not glory in himself, therefore he endures." Chen Guying, across a lifetime of scholarship, has shown, has been distinguished, has earned lasting merit, precisely because he was never primarily concerned with shining, being distinguished, or earning merit. He was concerned with the Tao, and in that concern, everything else followed naturally. Let us take a moment to reflect on what Chen Guying has meant for readers in the Chinese-speaking world. Before his generation, most annotated editions of Laozi and Zhuangzi were written for other scholars. They assumed enormous amounts of classical learning, and were largely inaccessible to anyone without years of specialized study. Chen Guying changed that. He believed that the wisdom of Laozi and Zhuangzi belongs to everyone, not just to university professors and graduate students. A high school student should be able to pick up his annotated Laozi and come away with a genuine feeling for what Laozi was saying. This democratization of classical thought was one of his most lasting contributions. He brought the ancient masters out of the academy and gave them back to the people who needed them most. Ordinary people navigating difficulty, young people searching for meaning, anyone who felt that modern life was moving too fast and wanted to find a place of stillness. Zhuangzi writes about something he calls the fasting of the mind. This is a practice of emptying the mind of its constant chatter, its endless desires, its habitual judgments, until one arrives at a state of open receptivity. Chen Guying often returned to this idea in his later writings. He observed that the modern world makes the fasting of the mind extremely difficult. We are surrounded by noise, by stimulation, by the pressure to produce and perform and compete. The Taoist insight that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop, empty out, and wait for clarity, is more urgently needed today than ever. This sense of urgency kept Chen Guying working and writing well into his later years. He understood that the wisdom of Laozi and Zhuangzi is not a historical curiosity. It is a practical resource for living, a set of tools that humans have tested across thousands of years and found genuinely useful for navigating existence. He once described his work this way. He said that Laozi and Zhuangzi were like clear springs. hidden in the mountains. His job was simply to build a path, so that more people could find their way to the water. He was not the spring. He was the path. That image captures everything essential about Chen Guying. His selflessness, his clarity of purpose, his understanding that the greatest service a scholar can perform is not to be remembered themselves, but to ensure that what they love continues to reach the people who need it. Before we bring this episode to a close, I want to share something about the way Chen Guying reads the Tao Te Ching that I find particularly moving. Chen Guying has described how he returns to the text of Laozi again and again across the decades, and how it never stops revealing new dimensions. He said that when he first read the Tao Te Ching as a young student, he was struck by its poetic beauty. When he read it again in his 30s, he found political philosophy, an ancient critique of authoritarian governance. When he read it in his 40s and 50s, after the years of political difficulty, he found personal philosophy, a guide for navigating adversity with dignity. And when he reads it now, he finds something that resists easy description, a kind of companionship, as if the text has become an old friend, one who has been present through every major chapter of his life. This is a beautiful way to understand what a great philosophical text can be, not a puzzle to be solved once and set aside, but a lifelong companion, one that grows with you, that shows you different things depending on where you are in your journey. Chen Guying has said that this quality of perpetual freshness is itself the best evidence that Laozi was pointing at something real. If the Tao Te Ching could be exhausted by a single reading, it would mean the text was only pointing at something small. The fact that it cannot be exhausted suggests it is pointing at something vast. This observation deepens my appreciation of what Chen Guying has spent his life doing. He has not been trying to solve Laozi once and for all. He has been inviting readers to begin their own lifelong conversation with the text, to find in it what they need, at the stage of life where they find themselves. And this brings us back to the most essential thing about Chen Guying. He is not ultimately a man of books. He is a man of life. The books are how he has engaged with life. They are the medium through which he has sought to understand existence, and through which he has tried to help others understand it. Zhuangzi has a passage about a man who has mastered the art of swimming. Someone asks him, "Is there a technique to it?" He says, "I entered the water along with the native tendencies of the water. I departed according to the innate nature of the water. I never imposed my own will on the current. That is all." Chen Guying has spent his scholarly life in this spirit. He entered the world of Laozi and Zhuangzi, along with their native tendencies. He did not impose. He listened. He felt the current. And he helped others feel it too. In a world that is moving faster and faster, where the pressure to produce, to perform, to be seen, to achieve, grows louder with every passing year, the wisdom that Chen Guying has devoted his life to transmitting has never been more necessary. Laozi says, "Return to the root. Return to stillness. Return to what is natural and essential." This is not a message for people who have given up. It is a message for people who are wise enough to know that the most powerful thing is not always the loudest thing, or the fastest thing, or the most visible thing. Chen Guying understood this, and he gave us the tools to understand it too. I want to linger for a moment on one more aspect of Chen Guying that I think is deeply important: his willingness to change his mind. Over his decades of work, Chen Guying has revisited and revised his interpretations many times. Some of his earliest positions he has substantially modified in the light of new evidence or deeper reflection. This kind of scholarly humility is rarer than it should be. Many scholars, once they have established a reputation, become prisoners of their own earlier work. They defend positions they no longer entirely believe, because abandoning them would feel like defeat. Chen Guying has consistently refused that trap. He once said, "If you are not willing to be wrong, you are not really searching. You are only performing the act of searching." True inquiry requires the willingness to have everything turned upside down. This is deeply Taoist. Zhuangzi says, "The frog in the well cannot conceive of the ocean. The scholar with fixed views cannot conceive of the Tao." The openness that Taoism asks of us is not just openness to new experiences. It is openness to the possibility that what we believed was incomplete or wrong. Chen Guying has lived this teaching in his treatment of the texts, in his treatment of his own ideas, in his treatment of other scholars, even those who disagreed sharply with him. He has always been willing to engage with critics seriously, to look at the evidence they present, and to say, "You may have a point. Let me think about this again." This quality, more than any single scholarly achievement, is what makes Chen Guying a true philosopher, not just a historian of philosophy. The distinction matters. A historian of philosophy catalogues and explains what others thought. A philosopher actually does philosophy. They put themselves at risk. They commit to positions. And they remain genuinely open to discovering they were wrong. Chen Guying has done both. He has explained Laozi and Zhuangzi with extraordinary care and clarity. And he has engaged in original philosophical thinking about what those texts mean, about how they relate to other traditions, about what Taoism can contribute to the philosophical conversation of our time. This combination is rare, and it is what gives his work its enduring vitality. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want to offer one last thought, one that Chen Guying himself might appreciate. The Tao Te Ching says, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet." This is one of the most famous lines Laozi ever wrote, and it is easy to read it as simply saying, big things start small. Every great journey begins with a single step. But Chen Guying would want us to look more carefully. The Chinese original says the journey begins beneath your feet, not with a step, not with a decision to go, but beneath your feet, exactly where you already are. The wisdom is that you are already at the beginning. You do not need to prepare. You do not need to gather resources or wait for the right moment. The path starts here. From exactly where you are standing. Chen Guying began his journey in a turbulent era, in a divided world. From a position of exile and displacement. He did not wait for better circumstances. He began from where he was, and the path took him very far. This, I think, is the most personal lesson of the extraordinary life of Chen Guying. Wherever you are, whatever your circumstances, the path begins beneath your feet. See you next time.